Sorry if you guys could just be a little more patient. They're working on it. The challenge is that we published for Bagley Keene where the public could watch this, and it's on our website as opposed to YouTube or one of the other places. So we'll get there. You're muted, Jeff.
So is it showing both YouTube and on the Post website right at the moment?
What Rick said is it's showing on the YouTube site, but
Right.
we advertised our website as the
Right.
place to watch it.
But it's not on the website yet?
No, that's the one hangup that we're having.
Yeah.
Okay, it's streaming. Are we ready to start, Tobias? Mr. Chair, you could start whenever you like.
All right. Apologies for the lack of a screen. If you can't hear me, please let me know. I guess this is a welcome to the first Zoom. This is the first post-Zoom meeting ever, I assume, right? The finance meeting will be strange, but it'll be short. Let's call the meeting to order. Madam Secretary, you want to call the roll?
Brazil,
Here.
Bowie,
Here.
Doyle, Long,
Here.
Medrano, Ramirez.
Here.
All right, thanks. Before we begin with the agenda, I think, since it's the first words from Post Commission since all of the unrest, I think we all realize the need to acknowledge the issues of race and brutality and social discord swirling all around us, and all the overwhelming, sense of fear and anger and doubt and sadness and so forth. Tomorrow, I assume Chair Dudley will make opening comments and ask any of the commissioners to make remarks if they would like to. But if anyone feels the need or would like to offer comment now as well, that would be appropriate. It does seem strange to kind of head off into a little bit of budget talk while the elephant in the room kind of rampages. So on that note, I'm actually from Minneapolis. I go back 3 or 4 times a year. All my family's there, and I look like much of Minneapolis. White and privileged and educated and politically progressive and all that stuff. But I live every day with really no fear of arrest, and I live every day with really no fear of violence because I'm privileged, and I'm privileged, of course, largely because I'm white. So I just wanted to, welcome everyone today, but also put that out there. And I'll stop with a Nelson Mandela famously said that no one's born hating another person because of their background or their skin color. And that if people learn to hate, they can learn not to hate. So since Post is in the business of education, we'll kick it off right now. Anybody want to make a comment, or we'll get right at it? Okay, then the first action is the approval of the summary and minutes. If there's no objection, we can substitute the roll call for approval. Any objection? No objection?
No objection.
No.
All right. Then the first issue is the report on revenues. Are you going to show slides, John? Is that the deal? You're going to show that first slide? Yes, the state penalty fund slide?
Yes, it should be coming up any moment now.
Okay. It's not that important. We show this every year or every meeting, every 3 months or so. It continues to go down, the inexorable slide of the state penalty fund. But the state penalty fund, as you can see, continues to go down, and it's probably going to decrease roughly in the $10 million range as it has continued to do. Now, fortunately, in some ways, Post is only about 43% state penalty fund and about 55% general fund. John, you can lose that slide. But since 55% of our funding now is general fund, the question is obviously where's the general fund headed? And the general fund is in trouble. As you've probably been following, what do you've got there, John? Okay, the general fund's in trouble. In January, there was a projected surplus of about $6 billion in general fund. General fund revenue was running about almost $2 billion above projections through March, and then COVID hit. Now we're looking at a multi-year general fund revenue hit of about $40 billion. So hence the May revision, which made a series of adjustments and cut general fund revenues by about $12 billion. How it pertains to Post is really not affected by those cuts. Many of the departments were Post. I believe Manny will still be affected, John and Scott, in terms of the cut to the potential 10% or hit to the salaries. But in general, the Post budget was continued and was made whole. So there's three major takeaways, John, before you walk through the slides, if you're going to do that, is that Post remains whole. It's unusual and probably the largest May revision in history, as far as I know, in decades. There's never been one multi-billion like this. Maybe 2009 was pretty bad, 2006. Nonetheless, the governor kept Post whole in the face of these massive cuts. There were two major adjustments that we should touch on. There was a redirection of $10 million from the Shirley Weber money, the Assembly Weber money that we've talked about, the $25 million that was used for de-escalation, use of force, implicit bias training, and so forth. In the light of COVID, 10 million of that money is going to be redirected for similar purposes, essentially through distance learning. There's $5 million for a distance learning grant program that will touch on use of force, implicit bias, community policing, cultural diversity, and organizational wellness. And then there's $3 million to modernize and enhance the Post learning portal, and $2 million for distance learning course upgrades. That's the one adjustment. The other adjustment is a $16.5 million reversion to the general fund of unspent prior year general fund monies. I'll let Manny, you might want to address that, or Maria, but it's probably appropriate to go to that issue right now and talk a little bit about what that 16.5 million reversion, what impact that could have on your work. I think because they were unspent, we get out of the May revise relatively unscathed. So Manny or Maria, would you like to address either the 10 million or the 10 million redirection or the 16.5 million reversion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will address it. So of the money that reverted back to the state, it comes from three different pots of money. One, some of it is from local assistance that was dedicated for use of force that we didn't anticipate pushing out by the end of this year. So some comes from local assistance. Some also comes from procedural justice money that was 5-year money that will expire in June of 2021. So we left money there to do what we project we're going to need, and then the rest reverts back to the state. And then the last bit of money is Assemblymember Dr. Weber's funding, which was 3-year funding of $25 million. Some of that went back, and then some of it came back in the form of conducting some of her requirements online. So it comes out of those three buckets of money. I think it's also important to note that although our budget remains whole, I think the purpose of it remaining whole is the administration last year, as well as Assemblymember Dr. Weber 2 years ago, put a significant emphasis on furthering use of force training and de-escalation training and mental health training. A significant chunk of the money last year was dedicated to use of force training, and a significant amount of money again this year goes to use of force training, and obviously the timing is right for that. I hope I answered the questions, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I think there's really just three simple takeaways for the budget this year, and one, again, Post is whole. It's somewhat miraculous, but it's certainly a vote of confidence in the work of Post. Two is that 16.5, which is a reversion, but that's a fairly common budgetary move when funds are unspent and shouldn't have any dire impact on Post going forward. And the $10 million redirection, I think we can safely assume, is largely a COVID a reaction to the need for more distance learning and more online training, the same impacts. So a lot of departments, you could spend a lot of time discussing the hits that they're going to absorb through the May revision. Now, there was a lot of discussion about these cuts, but I don't think Post could have come out any better. And in my recollection, I don't think there's ever been a May revision this broad and this deep. So if any questions or comments about the three major impacts of the May revision? Otherwise, it's pretty much the budget we discussed in February.
I have a quick question, if that's right, Jeff.
Rick?
So Manny and Jeff, because you've got your ears at the Capitol, is there any pushback at all on Post for not spending some of that de-escalation money?
I'll let Manny answer as well, but I think yes, actually. I think that not anything severe, but I do think there was some concern heading into the revision of, would the optics be bad that you revert $16.5 million? There's no optics problems with the $10 million, and I haven't heard anyone be upset about that. I think generally, though, anytime a department has unspent funds, however legit it may be, especially when it's in a specific area like this, there are going to be parties. They're going to wonder why you didn't get that out. We've talked about that in all our meetings, all the finance meetings for the past few years, about the need to get money out the door as quickly as possible, but also doing it credibly. I don't sense that there's any real angst directed at Post for not spending that 16.5 or having it available for reversion. I do think there was some concern about the optics of, geez, is this the time to be reverting any money from an organization such as Post? But the decisions were ultimately, things are going well, let's go forward. Manny, do you have a different take?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for Commissioner Brazil's question. We knew going into October and February's commission meetings, as we talked, and we had spoken to the administration about the challenges we were going to have with rolling out the use of force training monies throughout this fiscal year. As you know, a lot of the training and the mandated training for use of force that we're supposed to develop rolls in on January 1 of 2021 in 6 months. So we didn't anticipate that we were going to be able to use all of it that quickly. We knew that it was going to be much more needed next year. So there are departments that are doing use of force training, and we need to provide a report to the legislature at the end of this fiscal year by agency. A lot of that's being done locally. So in some of the charts that you were provided, and I presume we're going to go over, I believe we've spent just over or approximately $1 million of local assistance money for use of force training. That's it. So obviously a lot of that money is going back to the state. A lot of that training has been done in-house by agencies. So there's no travel costs. There's no, hotel reimbursements and such. It's been done in-house. Next year, however, we do anticipate rolling out a standardized use of force course to the field. I know we're going to talk about that at the advisory meeting next. That will require people, officers, to come to those training courses, and the costs will go up significantly in terms of reimbursing for local assistance. So we did know that going into it. We had had a number of discussions with Governor Newsom's administration or within the administration going into this. So I think, fortunately, I hope that they've understood. I think we're in an okay spot.
I agree. But I would toss out the same cautionary note that I always toss out, that I think that the finance people, the budget folks understand how exactly what Manny's talking about. I always do want to keep an eye on a few legislators who are going to be looking for more immediacy. And we've always got to be aware of that. That doesn't mean we push money out the door that isn't ready to go out the door. But yeah, there will always be at least a couple of legislators that we'll hear from as to why we couldn't get more money out the door faster. Part of the deal. Any other questions on basically the 3 points of this finance meeting, which is the 16.5, the 10 million, and the fact that Post has remained unscathed? And if not, John or Scott, did you want to kind of cut you off a little bit? Do you want to walk through a couple of your slides in more depth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we will go through those. If we can move over to what I think was slide 3, the 1920 expenditure report. One more slide. And one more.
You can address them, Scott.
You kind of touched on all of them.
Yeah.
If we would.
Sorry, I bogarted you.
You did, for sure. So now that we're on the 1920 general fund expenditure, as Executive Director Alvarez mentioned, you can see the expenditure of $844,000, pushing $1 million on de-escalation, and that's the local assistance monies there. Of our 81,363, we've spent $43 million, and this is as of May 14th. So now we're about a month behind on this in our expenditure numbers. And so we have spent a bit more money than this, but our balances are almost $38 million left for this report. And so keeping on that slide right there, the special expenditures, the general fund piece of it. So from FY19 and 20, we had $34.9 million. We spent 8.3 with 26.5 million left to expend. Of course, it's 3-year money, so we've got 2 more full fiscal years. Much of this money, we've obviously been sidetracked by COVID since the middle of March. Items like local assistance, the training that the agencies have sent their folks to have certainly pulled back the sending of their staff to training, and therefore we haven't had much in the way of expenditure and reimbursement to those agencies. Go ahead and move on to if there are no questions on slide 4, let's go ahead and move on to slide 5, which is the previous fiscal year, FY 18-19 general fund expenditures. And this is where Assistant Director Alvarez spoke, or Executive Director Alvarez, excuse me, spoke of the $16 million coming back to the general fund from this pot of money. You'll see that we still have that in the expenditure side, we still have a zero amount in the $5 million. And I think that Assistant Executive Director Sandoval will speak to where we are on the expenditure of funds for the force option simulators.
We have pushed that out, and we went through the whole bidding process and awarded the contract to an organization, but we have had 2 individuals who have challenged that, and therefore that's going through the process with DGS, but it appears that that should be wrapped up as of yesterday. We have not been notified of the outcome of that. However, that will be, we should be able to get that money spent by, I would assume, December 30th, with the training still going out, the T4T training going out at the same time. So we should be delivering the training for the course as well as a train on the machines within the next 4 to 5 months, I would assume.
So circling back to this slide, as was stated previously, the $10 million in the BCP came out of this fund year, and then the 16 going back. So essentially, at the end of the day, we're going to be down to just a few $1 million left in this to expend, and that's from the, again, FY 18-19 general fund. Questions about that one? All right, moving on to the training reimbursement request, the next slide. So again, this slide depicts the funds that we reimburse the agencies for sending their staff to training. The first row is what we expended, the total numbers processed and the expenditure back to the agencies for the entire calendar year of 2019. And then the one just below that is reflective of the reimbursements given to the agencies from January 1 through the May 19th of this year. So as I mentioned, and as well known, with COVID, the agencies are not sending their folks to training. We expect that hopefully will ramp up into the next fiscal year. So you'll see our total dollars expended for this year are going to be probably less than they were last year. as has been discussed in previous commission meetings, that we took care of the backlog from the last couple years of training reimbursement requests, and the advent of electronic submission processes from the agencies to post has really significantly helped out as well. Questions about the training reimbursement requests? All right, and then let's go on to the next slide, which is depicts our commission-approved contracts for the current fiscal year, FY 1920. In the first column, through all the bureaus that had training contracts that were in need of approval through the commission. The second column depicts the actual executed contract amounts, either up to or at the amount that was approved by commission. And then you'll see at the next column, as of about a month ago, the unexecuted balances remaining for a variety of reasons. The contract did not get executed up to the approval level that commission allowed for either the vendor could not put on or the training. So the contract was set a little bit less than what was allowed. Questions about contracts?
If there's no questions on contracts or any of the other points made, that would just about wrap up the Finance Committee. Any comments?
I do have a question. Can we go back 2 slides to the innovative grants, please? Okay, so it looks like quite a bit has been expended already. I did get a question regarding the organizations that did receive grant funding, and it looks here that we had a lot of courses on use of force and officer wellness, which I'm very grateful for. But out of the 5 categories, it looks like we are short on maybe some of the implicit bias and community policing categories. Is there any outreach that we need to be doing to get more applications for those type of courses?
Manny, Maria?
Yeah,
That-
we
And that will also pertain to the new grant program, right? The distance learning grant program. So Lila's question is appropriate. I think those are for maximum grants of 350,000. But that question certainly applies going forward for the new grant program under the redirection of the 10 million as well, right?
That's correct. And we have Andrew Mendonça, who's going to step up, who's in charge of the innovative grant programs. And he can kind of answer your questions for you, Lila.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So grants were largely awarded based on applications we received, obviously. And so we had a lot more grants that came in under officer wellness and use of force. I think we actually funded most of the grants that were applied under community policing and implicit bias. We didn't have a lot of control, obviously, over which categories people applied under. We did do some outreach, so we had some public hearings initially, and then in between, we actually had 3 total rounds of funding. We did some outreach in between, and we tried to generate as much interest as we could in the grants, but ultimately we were sort of stuck with what we got as far as applications. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, that does answer my question. And you said, I'm sorry, what type of outreach was done?
So initially, actually, prior to the launch of the Innovations Grant Program, we held a couple of public meetings. And then in between the first and second round, we went back out to try and generate some more interest and walk people through kind of what the process was and what to expect. And obviously, Post is not normally in the position of interacting with nonprofits. And so we had reached out to some of our existing grantees and asked them to really publicize the fact that these grants were coming out and serve as a resource for agency or for nonprofits specifically that were interested in applying.
Do we have any partners that we can tap to do the outreach for us? I mean, we have a huge advisory committee.
Yeah, so we reached out to our existing grantees. We reached out with, we reached out to through as many different avenues as we had at the time. I mean, certainly if there's members of the advisory committee that are interested in reaching out, for additional grants under distance learning, I think it's probably a good thing to do. All of the grant money has been allocated out of the original IGP program, so we don't really have any more that we could dedicate under that program. It was only open for specific periods of time, and then it would close. And based on the results of the scoring, then we would obviously award grants. And then if there was money left over, we reopened it again. But almost all the money under IGP has actually already been allocated to existing grantees.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
But while we're there, so then the same question would apply though to the new distance learning grant program, correct? So what have we learned? What have we learned in terms of Lila's question, what have we learned so that we don't come up short if someone chooses to view it that way for the new grant program?
Sure. So a couple of things. So if we recall under the initial allocation, we did not specify a certain amount of money for each of the different topic areas. And so certainly one of the things that we could do is break up those topics and limit the grants to those particular areas if we wanted to make sure that we got certain amounts of grants in each particular topic area. Something else to keep in mind is that some of the grants will actually transition over multiple categories, right? So like we have, I'm particularly thinking of a use of force de-escalation course that has elements of implicit bias built into it. Or we have other courses that have, officer wellness and de-escalation. So at times it's difficult to sort of pigeonhole them into one particular project topic area. And we've largely left it up to the grantees to identify which topic area they felt most fit their program. But a lot of our grantees have done a good job of actually trying to bridge several of the topics. Obviously, we know that issues of implicit bias, relate to community policing. But we kind of, for the purposes of administration, we had to actually tag which topic area that was going to go under. As far as lessons learned, I think one of the things that we've done a really good job of doing over the last few years is really working with our community-based nonprofits to advertise the training that's going on, and then asking them to reach out regionally within their communities and make sure that, certainly when we have additional grant opportunities come up, that they make their their sort of groups that they're familiar with, they engage with, make them familiar with these programs that are coming out.
Andrew, if I can just push one more question, kind of, and maybe I missed it, but what is kind of the rollout period then? What's your timeline on the new grant program?
On the distance learning?
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. I wasn't prepared to speak particularly to that today, but I think we're looking at an initial rollout of July 1st. It'll be open for, I would guess, around 6 weeks for applications, with the idea that we would actually go into award sometime in September or October.
So it's pretty quick in terms of getting the word out, and especially in light of the concerns Lila expressed. So you're trying, when are you going to try to have most of your bids done? By the end of the year?
Yeah, the idea I think would be that we would have about 6 weeks of an application period, be into award by October 1st. My understanding was, at least the last time I heard, and this may have changed, was that we only had until the end of the fiscal year. And so that leaves a very, very compressed time frame for grant activities. Particularly, one of the challenges that we had with our community-based nonprofits was they'd never interacted with POST before. And so part of what we had to do under the grant was actually get them up to speed on what our regulations are, how to build out courses, doing some of the developmental work before they could even start delivering courses. The advantage of IGP was that we had 3 years to do that. The distance learning is significantly more compressed than that. So I'm not sure yet what that's going to look like as far as rollout and how quickly we can get those groups, sort of folded into our process. I think we've done a good job with our current grantees, sort of getting them familiar with POST, getting them familiar with our regulatory requirements, understanding just how to advertise their courses to their local jurisdictions. And certainly we'll try and replicate some of that with the distance learning grant. But again, that's a slightly different, distance learning is obviously a slightly different project. And so I don't yet know if we know, if we've got community-based groups in Southern California, but they can host training for Northern California agencies. I'm not sure what that outreach is going to look like yet, or even how they're going to advertise those courses. Those are still some of the detail pieces I think we need to work out.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Lila. Any other questions on any of these topics? There's no old business, there's no new business. there's no other comment, this would bring the Finance Committee to a close. Any comment? Anything in closing? Then we'll see everyone tomorrow, and the Finance Committee is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming.
So you want us to all leave, right, Manny?
Yeah, if you would, and then you can watch the meeting, the advisory meeting, which will start at 2. We'll let the advisory folks now in to we'll bring them in from the lobby, and we'll kick you all off, and then just watch it on the public website, and hopefully it should stream.
Are you off of YouTube now? Are you on YouTube too?